The last time you killed me, you cried. The words were barely louder than the wind, but they struck Adrian Cross harder than any command ever had. He stood at the center of Valeria's grand execution square, dressed in black from collar to boots, with the silver emblem of the Imperial Guard pinned over his heart. Thousands watched from behind iron barricades. Nobles filled the balconies above. White banners snapped against a pale winter sky. At Adrian's feet knelt Elias Hart, a young man accused of impersonating a saint, disturbing the peace, and inspiring dangerous hope among the poor. He did not look dangerous. His blonde hair had fallen across his forehead, and his blue eyes held no panic, only a strange, aching recognition. Adrian had completed every assignment the Empire had given him. He had entered locked rooms without opening doors, crossed guarded halls without making a sound, and made powerful men disappear from history. People called him the Black Reaper, though Adrian had never cared for names. Names belonged to people. He was an instrument. Instruments did not hesitate, yet his hand had stopped. The ceremonial blade rested inches from Elias's shoulder, perfectly steady to the crowd, while beneath Adrian's glove, his fingers had gone numb. "What did you say?" Adrian asked. Elias lifted his face. Snow caught in his lashes. "You heard me." A murmur moved through the square. High above them, Emperor Cassian leaned forward on his gilded balcony. His expression remained calm, but Adrian noticed the small movement of 2 fingers against the railing. A signal. The brand beneath Adrian's ribs responded at once, warming like a coal buried under his skin. "Obey. Finish the order." Adrian forced his gaze back to Elias. "We have never met." "Not in this life," Elias said. Something shifted in Adrian's memory. Candlelight. A ruined chapel. A voice saying his name with tenderness instead of fear. Then the image vanished, leaving only the cold square and the impossible boy kneeling before him. Elias looked past Adrian's shoulder, and his calm expression broke. "Move." Adrian did not ask why. Instinct took control. He stepped forward, turned, and pulled Elias against his chest just as a dark arrow struck the wooden platform where Elias had been kneeling. The crowd screamed. Imperial guards surged toward the stairs. Adrian stared at the arrow, then up at the distant bell tower. The execution had never been the only plan. The Emperor wanted Elias erased, with or without Adrian's obedience. "You protected me," Elias whispered against his coat. Adrian released him immediately, as if the contact had burned through every layer of fabric. "Do not misunderstand. I don't." Elias looked at him with heartbreaking certainty. "You always protect me first." The brand beneath Adrian's ribs flared hotter. Around them, guards closed in, boots shaking the platform. Adrian had one order, one reputation, and one chance to remain the Empire's most loyal weapon. Instead, he seized Elias's wrist and ran. Adrian pulled Elias through a narrow arch beneath the execution platform, just as the square erupted into confusion above them. The hidden passage smelled of wet stone, dust, and old candle smoke. Their footsteps echoed through the darkness, too loud, too fast, too human for a man who had spent his life moving like a shadow. Elias stumbled once, and Adrian caught him by the waist before he could fall. The contact lasted less than a second, but something warm flashed beneath Adrian's ribs, not the sharp command of the Imperial brand, but a strange quiet that made his breath catch. He released Elias immediately. "Keep moving. You could say thank you," Elias replied, slightly breathless. "For what?" "For warning you about the arrow." Adrian glanced back. "You were the target." Still, basic manners seem appropriate. No prisoner had ever spoken to him like that. No one spoke to him like anything. Adrian continued down the passage until they reached an iron door hidden behind a curtain of roots. Beyond it waited an abandoned service tunnel beneath the eastern wall of the capital. A pale strip of daylight cut across the floor. Adrian pressed 2 fingers to the stone beside the entrance, listening for movement outside. "How did you know my name?" he asked. Elias leaned against the wall, catching his breath. His hands were still bound, but his expression remained almost irritatingly calm. "I told you. I remember pieces. Memories can be planted. So can obedience." Adrian turned toward him. Elias's gaze dropped briefly to Adrian's chest, directly over the place where the Imperial brand burned beneath his uniform. Adrian's hand moved to the hilt at his side. "What do you know about that?" Nothing clearly. Elias stepped closer, and the air between them changed. But every time I look at you, I see things that have not happened to me. A chapel full of blue candles. Rain on stained glass. Your hands shaking while you promised you would find me again. Adrian's pulse slowed, then struck hard. Stop. You call me Lucien. I have never known anyone by that name. Elias lifted his bound hands. Then why are you afraid of it? Voices echoed faintly from the passage behind them. Adrian opened the outer door, cut the rope around Elias's wrists, and guided him into a narrow alley lined with shuttered shops. Snow drifted between the rooftops. The bells of the capital began ringing, one after another, announcing a citywide search. Adrian pulled off his black cloak and placed it around Elias's shoulders. Stay close. Do not speak. Do not look at the guards. Elias studied him for a moment. You always become gentle when you are pretending not to care. Adrian stepped away, but Elias caught his sleeve. The moment his fingers touched the fabric, the brand beneath Adrian's ribs went cold. Completely cold. For the first time since childhood, the Emperor's command vanished from his body. Adrian stared at Elias's hand. Elias stared back, equally startled. Then, somewhere deep beneath the city, a second set of bells began to ring, older and lower than the first. Elias whispered, "They know I am awake." By nightfall, the capital was 12 miles behind them, hidden beneath a sky the color of iron. Adrian led Elias through a pine forest where snow softened every sound and moonlight clung to the branches like frost on glass. They reached an abandoned imperial hunting lodge just before the wind became unbearable. The building leaned slightly toward the frozen lake, its windows clouded with dust, but the roof remained solid and the stone fireplace still worked. Adrian checked every room before allowing Elias inside. He inspected the locks, tested the floorboards, and searched the cupboards as if danger might be hiding behind a jar of spoiled preserves. Elias watched from the doorway, wrapped in Adrian's black cloak. "Do you ever enter a room without assuming it wants to betray you?" he asked. "Rooms do not betray people." Adrian struck a match. "People do." The fire slowly filled the lodge with amber light. Elias found blankets in an upstairs chest while Adrian stood near the window, studying the tree line. He had barely moved in several minutes when his shoulders suddenly tightened. The glass in his hand cracked with a small, sharp sound. Elias crossed the room. "Adrian, stay back." The words came too quickly. Heat spread beneath Adrian's uniform, tracing the hidden brand under his ribs. The Emperor's command had returned, stronger than before, pulsing with every distant toll of the city bells. His breath turned uneven. He gripped the windowsill until his knuckles went white. Elias reached for him, but Adrian stepped away. "Do not touch me. You stopped hurting when I touched you before. That does not make it safe." Adrian's voice lowered. "Nothing about me is safe." The room shifted in his mind. Firelight became white laboratory lamps. The wooden walls became polished stone. He was small again, standing barefoot in a cold room while men in silver masks asked him to repeat his number. Not his name, his number. They had taught him silence before language, obedience before choice. Every mistake brought another lesson. Every success erased another memory. The Empire had not trained a child. It had emptied one. Adrian pressed a hand to his chest as the past crowded around him. "I cannot go back there," he whispered. Elias did not ask where. He simply stepped closer and wrapped both arms around him. Adrian went rigid. No one had ever held him without demanding something in return. Elias rested his cheek against Adrian's shoulder and stayed there while the fire snapped softly behind them. "You are here," Elias said. "The room is warm. The door is locked. The lake is frozen. I am not afraid of you." Gradually, the pain faded. Adrian's hands, uncertain and trembling, settled against the back of Elias's cloak. He slept that night for the first time without a weapon within reach. When pale morning light entered the lodge, Elias found him beside the dying fire, his shirt loosened where the brand had burned. Beneath the old scars, almost hidden along his ribs, letters had been carved into his skin long ago. Elias leaned closer, his breath catching as he read the name. Lucien. Adrian woke to silence and found Elias sitting across the room, staring at the name beneath his scars. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The fire had faded to red embers, and dawn pressed a pale silver light against the windows. "Who carved that into you?" Elias finally asked. Adrian fastened his shirt with careful fingers. I do not know. You recognize the name at the execution square. I recognize the fear it caused. That answer should have ended the conversation, but Elias had begun to understand that Adrian used silence like armor. He rose, crossed the small space between them, and stopped just close enough to feel the warmth Adrian tried so hard to hide. Then let us find out why. By midday, they were traveling north through the mountains toward the Temple of Broken Saints, an abandoned sanctuary mentioned in the oldest records of Lucien's life. The path narrowed between cliffs glazed with ice. Wind pulled at their coats, carrying the scent of snow and distant cedar. Adrian walked ahead, testing every bridge and watching every ridge, while Elias followed with the uncomfortable awareness that he trusted this man more with each passing mile. Near sunset, the temple appeared through the mist. Its white towers had cracked with age, and vines twisted across statues whose faces had been worn smooth by centuries of weather. A woman waited beneath the ruined archway. She had dark red hair streaked with gray, a long blue coat, and the expression of someone who had expected them long before they arrived. Adrian Cross, she said, still serving an empire that never deserved you. Adrian moved in front of Elias. Mara Whitmore. You remember me? Only that I should not trust you. Mara smiled without warmth. Then some of your training survived. Inside the temple, hundreds of candles burned without visible flame. Their light drifted through the air like small golden stars. Mara led them into a circular chamber where a black stone crown rested inside a glass case. The hollow crown, she explained, the source of the emperor's power. It was sealed generations ago by Saint Lucien, but the seal weakens every year. Elias felt the room tilt around him. What does that have to do with me? Mara looked directly at him. You are not merely Lucien's reincarnation. You are the living key. You can close the crown forever or open it completely. Adrian's voice became dangerously quiet. That is why the emperor wants him. That is why every emperor has wanted him. Mara crossed to a faded mural painted across the far wall. It showed Lucien in white robes, standing beneath a sky filled with gold. Beside him stood a man in black armor with Adrian's face. A silver sword rested in his hands. He was Lucien's sworn protector, Mara said. And according to every surviving account, he was also the man who ended Lucien's life. Elias could not breathe. Images flickered behind his eyes. Rain against colored glass. Adrian's trembling hands. A final promise whispered in darkness. He stepped away when Adrian reached for him. Are these feelings even mine? Elias asked. Or am I only repeating what someone else felt? Adrian lowered his hand. Pain crossed his face so quickly that Elias almost missed it. I do not need you to forgive me, Adrian said. I only need you to survive. Mara turned toward another section of the mural, where time had peeled away the paint. Beneath the damaged surface, Elias saw the outline of a third figure standing behind Lucien, one hand raised over the hollow crown. The face was still perfectly clear. It belonged to Emperor Cassian. Mara extinguished the floating candles with a sweep of her hand, and the temple fell into blue-gray darkness. We are out of time, she said. From beyond the ruined archway came the low rhythm of approaching horses, followed by the distant call of imperial horns. Adrian moved to the narrow window and looked down the mountain path. Black banners climbed through the snow. At their head rode Commander Nathan Vale, the man who had trained Adrian to obey before he was old enough to understand the word choice. There is another exit, Mara said. The burial tunnels beneath the sanctuary lead to the northern valley. Adrian turned to Elias. Stay beside me. Elias wanted to ask whether that was an order or a promise, but the look in Adrian's eyes made the question feel too fragile to speak aloud. They descended a spiral staircase into the earth. The tunnels were lined with stone figures of forgotten saints, their hands folded over silent hearts. Dust drifted from the ceiling as the temple bells began ringing above them, though no living hand pulled the ropes. Mara led them through a maze of narrow corridors until a heavy iron gate blocked the passage. She pressed both palms against its surface and whispered words Elias did not understand. It will take time, she warned. Footsteps echoed behind them. Adrian guided Elias into a small side chamber just as a section of the ceiling shifted, sealing the entrance with fallen stone. Darkness swallowed them. Elias heard Adrian's breath, controlled but too quick. Are you hurt? Adrian asked. No. Are you? That is not important. It is to me. Elias reached through the darkness until his fingers found Adrian's sleeve. Adrian did not pull away. Another tremor passed through the chamber. Elias's breath caught, and the walls suddenly felt too close, the air too thin. Look at me, Adrian said. I cannot see you. A small golden light appeared between Adrian's fingers, weak but steady. It illuminated the sharp line of his face and the concern he could not hide. He placed one hand beside Elias's cheek without quite touching him. You are here. The floor is stable. Mara is opening the gate. Breathe with me. Elias followed the slow rise and fall of Adrian's chest. The panic eased, leaving something warmer in its place. You always know how to bring me back, Elias whispered. Adrian's gaze dropped to his mouth, then returned to his eyes. I do not remember learning. Maybe you did not have to. Elias closed the distance and kissed him. It was gentle, uncertain, and over almost before either of them understood it had begun. Then the chamber filled with white light. A memory opened inside Elias like a door. Rain struck stained glass. Lucien stood before Adrian in a burning chapel, tears shining in both their eyes. Adrian held a silver blade between them. Please, Lucien whispered. Adrian shook his head, broken and terrified. Lucien placed his own hand over Adrian's and guided the blade forward. The vision ended before Elias could hear why. He stumbled away, one hand pressed to his chest. Adrian reached for him. Elias. You did it, Elias said, his voice barely holding together. You ended his life. The fallen stone shifted as Mara opened the passage from the other side. Elias stepped past Adrian without looking back. Mara saw his face and understood enough not to ask. Behind them, Adrian remained in the dark chamber, silent and motionless, while the footsteps of the imperial soldiers drew closer. Elias followed Mara through the burial tunnels while the memory of Adrian's trembling hands repeated inside his mind. The passage opened into a narrow valley where snow moved across the ground in silver waves. Mara had taken only 3 steps into the open when lanterns flared along the ridge. Commander Nathan Vale stood beneath a black imperial banner, calm and immaculate despite the storm. The Emperor requests your return, he said. Mara raised one hand, but Elias caught her wrist. More soldiers waited behind the rocks, and several wore the same faint mark beneath their collars that Adrian carried beneath his ribs. They were not guards. They were prisoners dressed as guards. Let her go, Elias said. Nathan studied him with cold interest. You surrender easily for the reincarnation of a saint. Mercy is not surrender. Nathan allowed Mara to leave, though his expression promised the choice had amused him more than it should have. Elias was taken back to the capital in a closed carriage. He expected a cell. Instead, Nathan brought him to a quiet suite inside the oldest wing of the palace, where every window faced an inner courtyard and every door locked. From the outside, you will remain here until the ceremony, Nathan said. What ceremony? The one Adrian was created to complete. When Nathan left, Elias searched the room. The bookshelves held harmless histories, the desk contained blank paper, and the fireplace had been sealed. Yet Lucien's memories stirred whenever Elias passed the eastern wall. He pressed his palm against the paneling and felt a faint pulse answer beneath the wood. A hidden latch released. Beyond it waited a narrow records chamber filled with ledgers, sealed letters, and rows of small silver tags. Each tag carried a number instead of a name. Elias opened the nearest ledger. The pages described children selected for imperial service, their memories altered through crown magic, their loyalty enforced by living brands. Hundreds of entries filled the book. Adrian's number appeared again and again beside the words exceptional retention, repeated resistance, attachment to subject Lucien. Elias turned the pages faster. At the back, he found a report from the night Lucien died. The official history claimed Adrian had betrayed his sworn charge. The private record told another story. The hollow crown had entered Lucien's mind and begun using his body as a doorway. Lucien had ordered Adrian to break the vessel before the crown could fully awaken. Adrian refused until Lucien placed his own hand over Adrian's and begged him to save everyone else. The Emperor then removed Adrian's final memory of the conversation, leaving only the moment of loss. Guilt had made him easier to control. Elias sank into the chair, the paper shaking between his fingers. Adrian had carried punishment for an act of love across lifetimes. A second document lay beneath the report. It described the coming ceremony. The crown could not enter Elias unless Adrian willingly repeated the final act. The emperor intended to force that choice by making Adrian believe Elias had already been lost. Footsteps approached outside. Elias hid the documents beneath his coat just as Nathan unlocked the door. "You should prepare," Nathan said. "Adrian is coming for you." Elias met his gaze, no longer confused, no longer afraid. "Good," he replied. "Then the emperor has made his last mistake." Adrian entered the palace through a forgotten aqueduct beneath the eastern gardens, moving through corridors that had once belonged to servants and prisoners. Above him, bells marked midnight. Each toll tightened the imperial brand beneath his ribs, pulling him toward the ceremonial chamber like an invisible chain. He knew the emperor expected him. He also knew Elias was somewhere ahead, and that knowledge made every command inside his body feel smaller. At the top of a narrow staircase, Nathan Vale waited beneath a row of unlit portraits. He wore no helmet and carried no weapon in his hands. "You were always difficult to replace," Nathan said. Adrian stopped several feet away. "Move. The emperor offered you freedom." Nathan opened the collar of his uniform, revealing a pale mark near his heart. It matched Adrian's brand. "Bring Elias to the crown, and your command will be removed. You can walk away from the empire tonight." "And Elias? He will become something greater than either of us." Adrian's expression did not change, but the air around him seemed to sharpen. "That is not an answer." Nathan looked tired for the first time. "It is the only answer men like us receive." Adrian remembered cold rooms, numbered tags, and lessons disguised as mercy. He remembered Nathan standing at the edge of every training hall, teaching children to survive by becoming useful. For years, Adrian had believed the commander was incapable of fear. Now he saw it clearly. Nathan was not loyal. Nathan was trapped. "Come with me," Adrian said. Nathan almost laughed. "There is nowhere to go. There is always somewhere." The brand flared, demanding obedience. Adrian pressed a hand to his chest and remained standing. "You taught me that pain ends when the lesson is learned," he said. "You were wrong. Pain ends when someone refuses to continue the lesson." Nathan's gaze shifted toward the ceremonial doors. "You cannot save him. I am not asking your permission." Nathan stepped into Adrian's path. For one suspended moment, teacher and student faced each other beneath the silent portraits of emperors who had controlled them both. Then, Nathan raised one hand, and the corridor filled with silver light. Adrian answered by drawing the magic into his own brand. The force drove him to one knee, but he did not return it. He simply endured until Nathan's spell faded. "Why did you not strike back?" Nathan asked. Adrian rose slowly. "Because Elias would want me to remember that you are still a person." Something in Nathan's face broke. He lowered his hand and moved aside. "The western passage," he whispered. "It reaches the chamber faster." Adrian ran. The brand burned hotter with every step, but Elias's voice lived beneath the pain. "You always protect me first." He reached the ceremonial hall and pushed through its golden doors. Emperor Cassian stood beside the hollow crown, surrounded by white fire. Elias waited at the center of the room in ceremonial robes, perfectly still. Adrian called his name. Elias turned. His blue eyes had become black and depthless, and when he smiled, the voice that answered belonged to something ancient. "You came back," it said, "just as you always do." The ancient voice filled the ceremonial hall, but Adrian kept his eyes on Elias. Somewhere beneath those darkened eyes, beneath the white fire and the borrowed smile, the man he knew was still listening. Emperor Cassian stood beside the hollow crown with one hand raised, his face bright with triumph. "Complete the ritual," he commanded. The brand beneath Adrian's ribs answered with a wave of heat, yet Adrian did not move. The presence inside Elias tilted his head. "He cannot save you," it said, "but you can save everyone else." The hall vanished from Elias's sight. He stood in a silent field beneath a colorless sky, facing a figure shaped from shadow and gold. Around them appeared hundreds of children wearing silver number tags, followed by soldiers, servants, and prisoners bound to the empire through the crown. "Give me Adrian," the presence whispered, "and every one of them will be free." Elias looked at the frightened faces surrounding him. In another life, Lucian had believed innocence meant remaining untouched by darkness. Now Elias understood the truth. Innocence was seeing cruelty clearly and refusing to become cruel. In return, I accept, he said. The presence smiled. Back in the hall, Elias's eyes returned to blue for a single heartbeat. He looked at Adrian, then at the silver ceremonial blade resting beside the crown. You have to do it again, Elias said. Adrian's face went still. No, trust me. That is what you said before. His voice nearly broke on the final word. Elias stepped closer. White fire circled his shoulders, pulling at his robes like a storm wind. Then remember what came after. I chose you because you understood me when no one else did. Adrian searched his face. Elias placed one hand over Adrian's, guiding it toward the ceremonial blade, but not toward himself. His fingers tapped twice against Adrian's wrist, the same signal Lucian had once used when they needed to deceive the imperial court. Adrian saw it, a plan hidden inside a plea. Emperor Cassian smiled, believing history had surrendered to him. Adrian lifted the blade and stepped forward. Elias closed his eyes. At the last instant, Adrian turned the silver edge toward the black crystal floating behind Elias's heart, visible only through the crown's white fire. The blade touched the crystal without touching Elias. Light burst across the chamber. The sound was not an explosion, but a deep, clear note, like a bell ringing beneath the earth. Cracks of gold spread through the hollow crown. Emperor Cassian shouted a command, but every imperial brand in the palace began to fade. Nathan appeared in the doorway, staring as the mark near his heart dissolved into light. The presence inside Elias recoiled. You deceived me. Elias opened his eyes, now bright and entirely his own. No, he said. You mistook compassion for weakness. The crown offered Adrian freedom if he released the blade. He tightened his grip instead. Elias covered Adrian's hand with both of his, and together they pressed forward. The black crystal shattered into harmless sparks. White fire swept through the hall, carrying away every command, every stolen memory, and every chain the Empire had hidden inside its people. When the light faded, Adrian fell to his knees, no longer feeling the brand beneath his ribs. Elias knelt beside him and touched his forehead to Adrian's. You trusted me, Elias whispered. Adrian closed his eyes, breathing like a man discovering air for the first time. I always will. Behind them, the hollow crown crumbled into dust, and across the capital, locked doors began to open. 3 months after the hollow crown fell, the capital no longer sounded like a place waiting for orders. The bells still rang at sunrise, but now they marked open markets, school hours, and public meetings instead of curfews. White imperial banners had been taken down from the towers, and in their place hung plain blue cloth stitched by ordinary citizens. Emperor Cassian had disappeared from public life, and a temporary council now governed while the people decided what kind of country they wanted to build. Elias refused every invitation to join the new government. They need someone who understands power, Mara told him. That is exactly why I should not take it, Elias replied. Instead, he converted an abandoned estate outside the city into a home for children once marked by the Empire. The rooms filled quickly with voices, muddy boots, unfinished drawings, and arguments about who had taken the last honey roll. Adrian stayed there too, though at first he insisted it was only temporary. Without the brand, his body felt strangely light, but freedom was not as simple as he had imagined. He woke before dawn, checked every lock, and stood near doorways as if waiting for instructions that never came. Elias never forced him to speak. He simply left a cup of coffee on the table each morning and saved a place beside him at dinner. One afternoon, Adrian found 2 children in the garden trying to plant a young apple tree sideways. He stared at them for a long moment before quietly taking the shovel. Roots go down, he explained. Usually, one child said. Maybe this tree wants to be different. Adrian looked toward the porch, where Elias was hiding a smile behind his cup. Then it may grow sideways, Adrian said, but it will still need support. By spring, the estate had become known as Haven House. Nathan arrived one rainy morning without his uniform and asked if there was work he could do. Adrian studied him, then handed him a stack of broken chairs. Repair those. Nathan nodded as though he had been offered forgiveness. Mara taught history in the old dining hall, correcting every book that called Lucian weak. Elias worked in the clinic, tending to frightened children with the same patience he had once given Adrian beside the frozen lake. Some nights, Memories of Lucian still returned, but they no longer felt like chains. They felt like letters from someone who had finished his journey and trusted Elias to begin another. One evening, Adrian and Elias stood in the garden beneath the apple tree. Its first blossoms opened white against the fading sky. "Do you love me because you remember him?" Adrian asked. Elias considered the question. "I remember what he felt," he said. "But I love you because I know who you chose to become." Adrian looked down at his hands that no longer waited for commands. "I do not know what comes next." Elias reached for him. "Neither do I." Their fingers met between them, warm and steady. Adrian glanced toward the house, where children laughed behind glowing windows. "Then I think I would like to stay." Elias smiled. "Good. You still owe me a properly planted tree." Adrian almost smiled back. Together, they knelt in the garden and pressed fresh soil around the roots, while behind them Haven House shone like a promise that no empire could ever own.